I would love to think I'm going to rattle some cages today. I have to be a little bit careful because if I come off as too biased talking about a political campaign that we cover in the business report, I'm going to get in real trouble. But my mask may rattle some of you. So maybe this will be my sticking it out there for a minute. It's a RBG mask that a friend of mine made from her craft culture place in New Orleans. But I have to say, it's so nice to be here among friends. I spoke to another Rotary group a couple of months back when things were still pretty much shut down, and they were one of the first bold groups to come back. They were not afraid of the pandemic. And really, I was not, I didn't think I was saying anything incendiary. I was really talking about stuff we had reported on in the business report about just where the economy was at that point and what some of the uncertainties were and what some of the fears and concerns were. And some of the people in this group, I mean, not only did they not like what I said, but they were downright hostile to the point that one man who was sitting back there yelled, "Fake news" at me. And I almost ducked because I thought he was getting ready to throw his plate. And I was like, oh, where's my Rotary Club? I want to be back among my people where I can wear an RBG mask with impunity, right? So anyway, I am just going to share a little bit with y'all about what I know about the mayor's race as it is right now. And I'm not a huge RBG fan, by the way. I mean, I like her, though, but I'm just saying that I just kind of word as a joke. But anyway, the mayor's race is really shaping up to be an interesting one. And I called this speech one for the books because it's just been that kind of year. You know, 2020, I love this meme. I hope it doesn't offend y'all, but this was my favorite meme of 2020. And a friend of mine posted that, who not only had terrible COVID, but then got terrible breast cancer. And so, I mean, to see that on her Facebook page, I was laughing till I cried. But it's just been that kind of a year. I mean, everything that could go wrong has, from the pandemic to the economic crisis, civil and racial unrest, a crazy presidential election campaign. I mean, personal tragedies right and left. I'm sure everybody in this room could raise their hand and know just a bunch of terrible stories of suffering. And in the middle of all this, I don't know why anybody would want to run a mayoral campaign, but it has presented some interesting political challenges because campaigning in person has been difficult, if not pretty much suspended. Raising money has been very difficult. And so, you know, to an extent, conventional political wisdom is just sort of thrown out the window. So, I mean, I sort of offer that up as a caveat. Everything I say, it's not the rules of the game that we're used to. But let's take a look at the candidates. Y'all know them, I think, but in case you didn't, for the benefit of my husband, who doesn't follow Baton Rouge politics at all and maybe is watching remotely at home, Sharon Weston Broome, our Democratic incumbent mayor, former legislator, got her start actually as a TV reporter, so there's still hope for me. Steve Carter, former state rep. He's running as a Republican, late entry into the campaign. Matt Watson, also a Republican. He is a term-limited city council member who served 2 terms. C. Denise Marcelle, who is the only other Democrat in the race and the only other African-American candidate in the race. She is a current legislator and a former Metro Council member herself. Jordan Piazza, the political newcomer in the race, very young man, restaurant owner, bar owner, grew up in Phil's Oyster Bar that his dad owned, and he was sort of a surprise candidate. And the other surprise candidate, E. Eric Gayrard, who is looking like a TV character from the 1970s or something, an extra on Charlie's Angels, but certainly very buff and good hair. So, you know, and witty commercials. So nothing against him for that. Right? Anyway, I want to look that good. Okay, so, you know, and Tara Wicker was going to be the other candidate in this race. And as y'all may remember from earlier, a couple of months back, she was the one that we had really been hearing about through much of 2019. She had been mounting a quiet campaign, had been trying to raise some money, and she got into the race and then had a little problem with an affidavit for saying that she had filed state income taxes that she says she thought she had filed, but the state said she had not. And she had to drop out. And it was really interesting, you know, for a couple of reasons. It shows the pervasiveness of opposition research, which now is just a given. I mean, if you're going to run for office, you better not have any skeletons in your closet, and you better not make any mistakes. And I'm honestly kind of surprised that poor Tara did make that mistake, but you know, it was a pandemic year. It was 2020. But also it's interesting because, I mean, the court challenge that was filed against her was filed by proxies for Broome, and there was very little secrecy about that. I mean, you know, it was pretty much Broome's people, because she really would have represented a potential threat to the mayor. With her out of the race, I think the mayor has certainly a clean shot to get into the runoff for sure. But whether she makes it into the wins outright is what we can talk about now. If you take a look at the polls, and we really only have one independent poll so far, but if you haven't followed it, it shows Broome at 41%, which is a comfortable lead, of course, for the first place spot. Carter at 14%, neck and neck with Watson, who had 13%. You can see I carefully did these to represent like maybe sort of the size of their share. I'm learning PowerPoint here. Denise Marcelle down in single digits with 6%. Jordan Piazza in this particular poll was just at 4%, and E. Eric at 1%. And you may remember this poll was in the news because this was the poll that the Baton Rouge Area Chamber commissioned. JMC Analytics actually did the work. And it was the poll that the chamber used to determine who was going to make their televised debate, which was held either last week or week before last on WVLA and WGMB. And Piazza complained. He said it was unfair. And they ended up relenting and letting him in and Eric into the debate. But there are a couple of significant things about this poll, because what I left out the first time is look at the size of the undecided vote. That is very, very huge. Nearly 1/5 of the electorate still doesn't know who they want to vote for at this point. You're going on 20%. So that's huge, and it's unusual in a race with a strong incumbent. Another thing that's important to mention about this poll, however, is that it was conducted 54% landlines to 46% cell phones. And that's sort of a way of keeping the cost down, right? But it's not necessarily the most accurate way to poll at all. In fact, the methodology is very suspect. So, because I mean, who in this room still has a landline? Right. And we skew older, and right. I mean, we're a little bit of an older crowd here, and so few of us even have a landline. So the people who answer landlines are really not at all necessarily representative of the electorate. So, you know, everything that I say about this poll is predicated on the fact that it could be totally irrelevant, but it's all we've got. And it is sort of interesting to look at the crosstabs. So I think this was my favorite breakdown, because it sort of shows who has strength coming from where, depending, you know, geographically. And you can see Broome with a double-digit lead over Carter in Baker and in, what do they call the inner city. And then in the Garden District, Broome has 34 to Carter's 16 and Watson's 9. And in Mid-City, Broome has 33% to Carter's 17% and Watson's 24. And so those are areas where you have more moderate swing voters. And those are the areas that helped elect Broome over Bodie White 4 years ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see which of, you know, whether those white moderate voters go with Broome or whether they switch over and go with Carter. Or, I mean, even in the Mid-City set, they appear to be supporting Watson. But Carter represented this district in the legislature, and he was effective there, and he was also very popular. So you would imagine that he would do well in those neighborhoods. The other thing is that Marcelle has 11% of the voters. And when you look at, I think I'm getting the race, and now I'm breaking them down by race. So when you look at the racial crosstabs, Marcelle has like 11% of the black vote, and that's the percent that Broome really needs to get into to win outright in the primary, and that's probably why she's not going to, and that's really probably why Marcelle is in the race, is to make it a harder contest for Broome. But the other interesting thing about the racial breakdown, again, to the extent that the poll is accurate at all, is that it really shows that the white vote is totally split, right? So Carter there has 20-something among white voters. Watson has 20-something. Undecided is 25, and Broome has 20. So the white voters, at least a month ago, when the poll was taken in this city, still had not really made up their mind. Now, endorsements this week, to the extent that endorsements matter, sort of show the extent of the division in the white community. Bodie White, who is a very sort of powerful political leader, his group, which included several members of the legislative delegation, endorsed Carter. But then over the weekend, Woody Jenkins and his little group in Central, the East Baton Rouge Parish Republican Party, endorsed Jordan Piazza, who you can see doesn't even have very much support, or at least didn't so far. So it's just interesting because it shows that the white vote is really splintered. Now, again, the poll was done about a month ago, and since then, these candidates have started to spend money to get on TV, to get their message out more on social media. So at the time that people were polled here, it was a lot more of a name recognition kind of poll than perhaps it would be if people were surveyed again today. But let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate. So Broome is the incumbent, and that counts for a lot. And really, there have been no major scandals in her administration. I mean, she really has not messed up anything. About the worst thing that really you can pin on her was back in the early days of her administration, when she hired that CAO and they didn't do a background check on him, and it turned out that he was a big scam artist, and she had to let him go after a week. And some people still have never forgotten that. But I mean, by and large, she's kind of held the ship steady, and she's done a decent job navigating the pandemic. And perhaps her biggest accomplishment is the MOVE BR $1 billion roads improvement project, which is a good infrastructure project for Baton Rouge. I mean, unless you totally don't believe in infrastructure at all. But more importantly, from her perspective, politically, it's a lot of money, a lot of money in the engineering and construction community that she has been able to spread around. And in fact, she divided the program management contract into two pieces, and each of those pieces has multiple pieces. And so there are a lot of people that are, to put it nicely, that are benefiting from MOVE BR. And it's going to be good for a lot of small businesses in this community as well. She's made a real commitment to equity, and some people don't like that. But I mean, as a practical matter, I think that's something that you have to do in a community like this. And so they are actively working to find minority and disadvantaged business contractors that can fill some of the smaller jobs within the MOVE BR, just to try to be more inclusive. So I think those are all strengths in her favor. Her weaknesses is that the crime rate continues to skyrocket. And, you know, there are a lot of underlying systemic issues that are far beyond the scope of anything that a mayor or any sort of municipal administrator would be able to solve in a 4-year administration, like systemic poverty and things like that, disparate health outcomes. And so she has to deal with the fruits of that, but those are not issues that she created. And, to the extent that she's been able to move the needle in addressing them, well, I don't know, but those are weaknesses that continue to plague this city. And so it gets pinned on her. And she's still unpopular with a certain segment of the population. There's some people who just don't like her and will not forgive her for anything she does. I mean, it's kind of like Mayor LaToya Cantrell in New Orleans, and you hear people talk disparagingly about LaToya, like as if they know her personally and have right to say her first name in a snotty way. And They do the same thing about Broome, but I won't go into that anymore. So let's take a look at her financial picture. She's doing very well. She is the best funded of the candidates, which certainly one would hope and expect of an incumbent. At the last campaign finance reporting period, which was about a month ago, or it was maybe right at the beginning of this month, I'm losing track of time, October 2nd, I believe, she had $355,000 in her war chest. Her biggest contributors, I'm not saying the majority of her money has come from Jim Bernhard, but her biggest single contributor has been Bernhard and his family and his various engineering companies. She's also gotten money from PACs. Like being an incumbent, she picks up a lot of money from things like Congressman Cedric Richmond's PAC and some out-of-state groups as well that other candidates would not get. She's also gotten a lot of money from the engineering and construction companies that are benefiting from Move BR. Carter is this, Carter's strengths here. Carter is, he's very well liked. I mean, the guy just is blessed with a great personality, and he's very well financed because he's personally wealthy, or his wife at least is. She was a Solomon. He's also been successful at raising money. He also has a successful track record in the legislature. He was the head of the Capital Region delegation. He got along well, was able to bring people together, worked on some transportation infrastructure projects that were good for Baton Rouge. His weaknesses are that he waited very late to get into the race. I wish I had scoop on like what really propelled him into the race, or who was the force behind that, or what his real decision, what the factors were that really pushed him over the edge. I don't know, but I know that he waited kind of late. So in this weird COVID year, it's going to be interesting to see if he even has a shot of unseating her. And he's not like terribly inspiring because he's an older guy and he's sort of middle of the road, but that's what some people like. And I think he's going to do well. I think he's going to do well in those areas in South Baton Rouge, like I said. His money he's also sitting pretty financially. Like I said, he's got personal money, but it doesn't appear from the review of the reports that I did a couple of weeks ago that he was financing this campaign himself, at least not yet. Most of his money has come from the business community, a lot of big business support. Art Favre is one of his single biggest contributors. Like Art Favre and 2 or 3 of Art's companies and Art's family members have all given money to Steve. Eddie Risponi and Bodie White, who I mentioned earlier, those are all big donors to the Carter campaign. Matt Watson. So Matt was one of the early ones to get into the race. Matt started talking about this in 2019. It was no secret. He started showing up on 107.3 a lot. His strengths are he's a sitting council person. He is popular in some segments of St. George, and he has a lot of friends in the police union. Now, I mean, Bodie has a lot of police union ties too, but Matt does have a lot of police union support, so that works in his favor. His weaknesses are he's very underfunded, and there's some skeleton in his closet that I would think would come out in a runoff. Lawsuits kind of thing, unpaid bills, that kind of thing. So, if he were to make a runoff, I think the campaign might get uglier. None of that stuff's really surfaced. And it's funny, candidates, nobody wants to be the mudslinging candidate, right? They call the media, they're like, why aren't y'all reporting about Watson's lawsuit, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, why aren't we reporting on your lawsuit either? It's sort of, when there's 6 candidates in the race, it's not our job to do the opposition research. But I think that might change, in a runoff. So he only had, as you can see, $17,000 on hand as of October 2nd. He had raised $26,500 in 2 months. And so, he spent it accordingly. He's not burning through it that fast, but he just didn't have that much coming in. What was sort of interesting reading his campaign finance reports was the way he spent it. Several $1,000s in little bitty meals. I mean, Soji, Sonic, Perks coffee, the whole thing. He Garden District coffee. I mean, he expensed every single meal. And I was like, is he living off of this campaign money? But he said no, that this is just his campaign style. He's a grassroots campaign. And he said, we can't throw big fundraisers in the age of COVID. I can't come out and speak to the Rotary Club. I'm not going to walk in a restaurant and start, shaking hands. So I'm just going to take people out one at a time and buy them a cup of coffee or a beer. And certainly he has, according to his campaign finance reports. But most of his money has come in just small little donations, a couple of $1,000s here or there. No big names even stood out on the report. It was sort of interesting. Denise Marcelle is an interesting character, and she is probably the most progressive or the most far left, or what some people call liberal candidate. She's pretty effective. You can totally disagree with her, but she is what she is, and you have to respect her for that. There's no playing games with Marcelle, and she's very accessible. She's in your face. If she disagrees with you, she'll tell you, and she'll listen to you. I'm not really sure why she's running, because she's underfunded and she doesn't have a chance against Broome. And I think she knows this. So I'm not sure what her motivation was. So far, she has about $47,600. She hadn't raised much more than that. She hadn't spent very much. Most of her money comes from her employer, who is G. Gordon McKernan. Some people don't know that. She's a lawyer. She works for G. Gordon and G. Gordon Zachary, G. Gordon Denham Springs, G. Gordon Lafayette, G. Gordon Baton Rouge. They all contributed. So, but I don't know why G. Gordon, other than loyalty to his employee, is helping fund her campaign. But that's a story for another day, or maybe another question. E. Eric Gerard, whose name I misspelled and didn't catch it. Sorry about that. But he's really not raising money. He's kind of funding his own campaign. He had some creative ideas, including like turning the police force and uniforms red, making them drive around in red cars. They were going to be the Red Stick Rouge or something. I don't know. The Rouge Patrol. But he's not a serious candidate. And so he's got good hair, witty commercial. He's got a good personal trainer. I don't know, whatever. But we can't take him seriously. So we're not going to spend any more time on him. Self-funded. Yep, Piazza. So, Piazza, when he called me, I heard through the grapevine, maybe last December, I think, that he was going to run for mayor. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, seriously. But I called him and he said, yes, I want to run. And y'all can break the story in the Daily Report. And so I think in early January, I reported that he was seriously considering it, and he was planning to announce in March that he was going to run. And we ran that, and nobody paid it any mind. And then in March comes around, and we're all in the pandemic, and life as we know it has come to an end. So I called him, and I'm like, seriously, are you still thinking about it? And he pretty much said no. It sounded to me like he was saying no. So I really didn't think about it much more. And then here we come in midsummer, and he decided that he did want to run. So, his strengths are that he's young and he's got fresh ideas, and that is great. And there's really no track record to hold against him. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, sorry about that. He picked up the endorsement of the East Baton Rouge Parish Republican Party over the weekend. He was very proud about that. So that's great. His weaknesses are that he's young and he's got no track record. And he's already burned through a lot of his money. He's spending very, very fast. He has a very good campaign consultant, Roy Fletcher. And Fletcher knows who to call. So he's burning through his money pretty fast. As of October 2nd, he only had $31,000 in the bank, and he had raised almost $85,000 between August and April. So, his burn rate is high. And the thinking is that you need to save your money, especially in this wonky race to the end, to blanket the airwaves, TV and radio and such with ads. And that's what gives, of course, Carter such an advantage at this point, is because he still has so much money. Piazza's money has comes mostly from millennials, small business people. I mean, I recognized a lot of names looking through his report that I knew, young people, young businesses, or you would see a bigger business that had given the mayor $5,000 or something, or had given Carter $5,000 and they gave him $1,000. So maybe they're just doing it to be nice or to encourage him. But, you know, I mean, if he's got political ambitions, this is, I guess, a good way to get his name out there, and then maybe when he runs for the school board or the legislature next year, he'll have a better shot at it. So what's next? We have this race in a couple of weeks. Broome's going to finish first. We're pretty much sure of that. Second place spot, everybody is pulling from the same demographic. You know, you can rule out Girard and you can rule out Marcelle. So Carter and Watson at this point are the two most likely favorites, just because they've got the name recognition. And we know in Carter's case, he has the money. And if our poll from JMC is to be believed, they also have the competitive edge over Piazza. But again, it's 2020. You don't know what could happen. Like I said, Carter is the sage bet because he is the best funded and he will blitz TV in the days leading up to the election. Now, I question, and I called a couple of people before I've, you know, as I was putting this together, because I'm like, how much does TV really matter today? I mean, certainly it does, right? But I mean, does it matter as much as it used to? Because I don't watch TV. And again, I'm in the older demographic. My kids, no way they watch TV. I mean, how many of y'all really watch TV like you used to, or really pay attention to ads? You stream, right? You watch good TV on Netflix and stuff. You don't see the political ads. So yes, obviously you still have to place a lot of money in TV, and TV is a lot more expensive than social media. But I mean, I think like I would be interested to do political science research and really see how all of the outcomes are shifting, and how people who know a lot more about this than I do are placing money in different places than they used to. What we do know, though, is there's going to be a blitz in the final couple of weeks leading up to this, and efforts to get the name out. So then we're going to have a runoff, and it's going to be a whole new race, and there are going to be just two people in it, and it's going to be Broome and somebody else. And what's going to be interesting is that the factors you're going to have fallout from the November presidential election, whichever way it goes. There's going to be a lot of angst and a lot of tension. And there might be some people who don't feel comfortable going to the polls. I don't know. I mean, we hear about voter intimidation. We don't really know what's going to happen. And there's also probably going to be a lot of burnout. And it's COVID. And if some experts are to be believed, you know, the weather might be cooler, case counts might be rising again. You know, we blessed, everybody loves to stand outside in these balmy days and wait to vote. That may not happen, I don't know, before the December runoff. And then it's December. And so to the extent that we're going to have a holiday season, people are going to start to be more focused on the holidays. So all of that is just to say a December runoff is typically a very, very low turnout election to begin with. This year we have all these ancillary factors in addition to the December factor, you know. So the key is really going to be who can put money on the street to get out the vote. And that's really going to be the key to the election. If I was betting on it, I would certainly bet on Mayor Sharon Weston Broome because of the demographics of the parish, because it's so hard to beat an incumbent anyway, and because she's well funded. She's got a tremendous, you know, campaign finance team headed by Walter Mansour. It's going to be, you know, I don't suspect that anybody's going to be able to unseat her. But again, who knows? So, and the whole getting to the poll issue, I mean, in all seriousness, what will it look like? We just really, really don't know. I'll be interested to hear what Jim Angster has to say on November, and how the November race, you know, plays out. I think will impact to an extent the way the December mayoral runoff ends up. But anyway, it's definitely one for the books. It's been that kind of year. So that's what I have to say. We have a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions.
And we do have a microphone over here so that everyone can hear. Any questions on that?
Marvin?
Kind of the St. George group, where would they be going with this?
Well, I think St. George is going to be probably divided like the rest of the white community between Watson and Carter and Piazza. I mean, I don't think the St. George group is going to have much support with the mayor. I do think, I mean, I think the Woody Jenkins endorsement, which is going to play with some of the St. George voters, will help Piazza. And I definitely think he'll pick up some of that. And I think Watson has a strong support there already. But the Bodie White endorsement also pulls from, you know, so I would say it's going to be pretty narrowly divided among all three.
This question comes from the virtual audience. David Koch asked, what is Mayor Broome's best economic win? And have any other candidates discussed their economic plans for the city parish?
That is such a good question. You know, I mean, I think she would say her biggest economic win has been the Move BR road tax, you know, because of what it will do for infrastructure and to help address the chronic traffic problems, make it easier for businesses to do what they need to do. I haven't seen any bold vision for economic development or anything else really from any of the candidates. You know, not that I've seen.
What can she or should she do about crime in the police force and getting them to be a little bit more effective?
Well, that's no, I mean, that's a good question. You know, I think Chief Murphy Paul is really trying to do a good job. You have, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, a lot of systemic issues that cause the crime or that lead to crime. And I think those issues really have not been addressed. You know, I mean, I don't think you can pin the whole crime thing on the mayor. I remember in New Orleans covering crime in the 90s that was just off the charts, right? We had 435 murders my second year on TV in New Orleans. I mean, last year they had like 100 something. So to an extent, crime rates go up and down. Now Katrina helped with the crime problem in New Orleans for a number of reasons. But, you know, to an extent, crime is cyclical and people don't really understand what makes it go up and down. The pandemic issues have certainly exacerbated the crime this year because you've got economic factors that have put people in more vulnerable situations. You've had young people, kids at home, you know, and I think this has fueled a lot of the whole drug issues. Most of the crime is still drug on drug related. It's retaliatory. You know, I mean, Hiller Moore's office, they have the Truce program, which is the successor to the Brave program. Is it working? You know, it doesn't really seem to be making that much difference at this point in time. But I mean, I can't tell you what I would do as mayor to solve the crime problem, but I definitely think that it's something that, yes, she needs to continue to address, but it's something that's much bigger than just the mayor's office.
With the record numbers of voters now, why are they saving their war chests for the last 2 weeks? Because people are voting now.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I really do. Because I think, again, people, you know, they're thinking like old school political wisdom. And this is a race where I think conventional political wisdom is out the window. People are voting now. I don't think anybody anticipated, as we keep reading, the record level of early voter turnout. But they should be spending now. And they're starting to, or at least from what I hear, people say that the commercials are on TV. I'm just not watching them, you know, but I think they're starting to. And we are really in that final stretch. I mean, we're less than 3 weeks out, right? 2 weeks out. Yesterday was 2 weeks out. Is that right? So, yeah. So, I mean, I think they're starting to spend now. So if you're not seeing them, either you're not watching enough TV or they, you know, some of them just don't have the money.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Can you foresee any circumstance whereby Mayor Broome could win in the primary election? General election.
I think it would be very, very, you know, I think it would be very, very hard. I really do, especially given the level of voter turnout. People are very invested. They're very interested in this, you know, in this race. So
do you think voter turnout favors her I mean, as you talked about, the voter turnout will be.
Well, I
much
think the
higher.
voter turnout is on both sides. I mean, and I think I haven't seen the breakdown, so I could guess, but I don't want to just venture there without really knowing the numbers, you know? I mean, I would think older voters, I would think probably more Democratic voters are turning out early because they're concerned about intimidation, you know, or they want to get out and they don't trust the mail-in process or whatever, the people that were more likely going to vote at home. And so you would think that would favor her. But I mean, she would need to, she's not going to pick up much of that undecided vote at all, because people that know her have already decided on her, and the undecided is going to go to one of the Republicans, you know, or maybe a tiny bit to Marcelle. So I don't think there's really any way she can pull it
But
off
if
in
you
the
think
primary.
that she's going to get as much support as she's ever going to get
Mhm.
in this first election, what gives you such confidence that she'll prevail in a runoff?
Because the demographics of the parish are such that she only needs to get like a small percentage of the white vote. And she already has that percentage of the white vote in the Garden District, in the Highland area, you know, in the mid-city area, based on those numbers. So that's why I think she'll probably end up doing it. She only needs to get like 10% of the white vote, and I think she's got that 10%. Well, anyway. All right, well, I think it's about time. Thank y'all.